There's so many jobs. I don't know.
All right, so let's go ahead then and get going. And I'm forgetting something. It'll come back to me. By the way, since we're now very close to World War I, the German World War I helmet has made an appearance back there on the fallout shelter candy in case of nuclear war. I'll get the World War I British and American helmet will come out too pretty soon. Yeah, that's real good. It was actually taken off a battlefield in 1945 in Italy. They were using a lot of World War I. We got home, gave it to somebody, and to me. There's no shortage of German or World War I knowledge. So it's not that rare. And I'm glad I have it. Also, right next to the pinata version of the Fat Man nuclear bomb. Yes, he made a pinata. So on that happy note, what did this guy write along with Frederick Engels? And he said that there would be a revolution, even though he said it might be a peaceful revolution, but that revolution will be replaced after the revolution until the people are ready for socialism. What kind of government will the country or countries would go away that he was kind of hoping the entity would have? What did he call it? Yeah, so dictatorship of the workers, I know. And how long would the dictatorship of the proletariat last in, let's say, the Soviet Union? Until the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. How long did it last in China? Still going. When people got power, they get power, and just basically became authoritarian. You know, they talked the side about workers and democracy, but the people were never ready. Which is one of the things about power. But also showed Marx understood certain things about the economy, but like everybody else, the prescriptions get a little bit dreamy because it becomes kind of like almost fantasy. You see it at every level. Speaking of every level, can we get to, did I show you that picture? Yeah. And I talk about the left-right spectrum, which, by the way, is not a great way to look at this because people are complex, and some people might have like a more right, conservative, whatever view on some things and left. I mean, it's not very good. Some people are fairly consistent. And for social Darwinism, who came up with the term survival of the fittest again? Who's the American? We like him. Yeah, that was Sumner. And basically it said that hierarchies, social hierarchies were what? Yeah, natural. It's always going to be like that. So classes are natural. So if government helps anybody, who should government help? Yeah, the big goes on top. By the way, then, should government do anything about monopolies if you believe in social Darwinism? No, because that's natural. Regulation of monopolies will be the biggest issue for the United States, and it's the biggest issue that nobody knows about today. By far, the biggest issue. That's why the inflation, all this stuff. We talked about that. Oh, what do we call that again? When there's only one supplier of goods, or what's that? One buyer of goods. Monopoly. I mean, that's so much of why we have high prices now. And I think that'd be a good one when all of you watching me organize the carpet rug on the floor. You understand my point? And so we got the Marx, we get the socialism, who controls the means of production? The workers, with the goal of being what kind of society? Yeah, classless, whatever that means. To a moderate socialist, that means significantly different than a more radical socialist. And boy, did they differ. So did we get to this at all, this scene? We got to this, we got Debs. Did I tell you about Debs at all? Did I tell you Debs got 1 million votes from a prison cell? He was opposed to World War I. The United States entered that war by choice, and he was opposed to the draft and was arrested for speaking out against the war. Oh, freedom of speech dies with total war. And he got over 1 million votes for president in 1921 from a prison. So third parties do not do well in the United States. We talk about that. Winner takes all. But it shows his personal popularity. No, he was never going to be, he was not allowed into the other two parties. But, so we got this? Do we get to this? So more left, whatever that means, radical would be, we kind of generically call them communists. And part of the communist problem is they inhabit mountain valleys where few people can see them, and therefore when they come out at you, and they looked at it as this is going to be an international revolution of all workers, and they believe the revolution might have to be violent. Seeing especially what happened in 1848 and other instances we'll get to in 1877, those with the money aren't going to give it up easily. And so there's a big difference in the point of view. We'll work through the political system, fight, protest, but work through the political system to get better working conditions for laborers, more rights, equality between the sexes or between color of skin. Here, they'll never give up or revolt. And people who were more radical looked at the more moderate socialists as not only almost like traitors, they saw them as worse than the as they saw people on the more right, because they're appeasing them. So they bitterly oppose each other. Nobody hates the communists more than the socialists, which is so weird because there are different types of socialists. So the Social Democratic Party in Germany, the huge socialist party there, was violently opposed to the communists, like after World War I. Gee, I wonder if there'll be a right-wing party that would take advantage of that. Let me do my pondering work. Do you know the party? So, with that, and so they're always going to be divided, and then the most radical left-wing are anarchists. Anarchism believes in socialism. No, they do not believe in anarchy. They don't want to break things that people run around on fire and like Road Warrior or something. First movie I could think of. No, they believe in perfect socialism. But the anarchism comes from they are opposed to the hierarchical system that's created everywhere. As they see it, any hierarchy equals a class. So if you have leaders amongst your movements, they will take over and become the leaders. You pen? I just thought you're doing this. And so on hierarchy, so they thought we're going to have no set hierarchy, well, just the people change. Because once you have somebody in charge, it'll become like a class and they'll stay in charge. Kind of like the dictatorship of the proletariats, the way they look at it. No true anarchist believes that they want anarchy. If you see somebody who says they're an anarchist, let's go break things and destroy, run away from them. They're a lunatic. And so, these are socialists. And what they say is, we have to blow up the system. Now, this might be violently or not violently, but blow it up. You blow up the existing order. That's the anarchist. Blow up the existing hierarchies. And out of that will become perfect socialism, perfect democracy, where everyone has equal political, economic rights, equality between the sexes, no discrimination based upon color of skin, all of that. Now, I'm not sure how you blow things up and come up into a perfect world, so there's some holes here. The most famous anarchist in American history is right there, Emma Goldman, an immigrant from Russia, and obviously an American citizen. She believed this could be peaceful. Yeah, fight, protest, be strong, but it could be a revolution in the ballot box and the way people think. We'll blow up the old system. Pretty amazing and influential person, but also you can imagine those in power were terrified for her because she, for example, was opposed to World War I completely, and that would be used as an excuse eventually to deport her after the war. But other anarchists look at it as they're never going to give up, and so we're going to need revolutionary terrorism. Revolutionary terrorism, or as they called it, propaganda of deed. And what they would use is terrorist acts to show the old order can't function. If you blow up buildings, attack government leaders, attack the monarchy, attack businesses, the old order will be destabilized and fall apart. And so the thought was, we will show how decrepit it is by pushing it over the edge. Well, you can imagine how those opposed to socialism would use this. Here's an anti-socialist poster implying that they're an anarchist going to destroy order. Now, there's elements of truth there, but there's going to be a wave of anarchist terrorist attacks that's going to go from 1870 to 1920 all over the world. Assassinations, bombing, the weapon of choice were bombs. In fact, many times they had kind of the cartoony round bomb. And that was the weapon of choice. Now, first off, what's terrorism? I say terrorism, you all know what it is, and actually to define it, it's hard to do, isn't it? So let's give a definition of terrorism. So let's make sure we get this down. I didn't type this in there because I didn't want to. Because I thought about it and then forgot. And then I thought after the first period, I should type that in. And then I ended up looking up questions for psycho. So I didn't type it in. So I'm going to tell you that. See, isn't that part of the plan? By the way, we got to talk about all this stuff. That is the fun thing about special topics. I can take time to do things like we can watch movies like Psycho and talk about how that affects the Cold War, which actually is a Cold War movie. Back to this. Terrorism is, first off, it's a political act. It's a political act. You want political change. Okay, if somebody just does something and calls themselves a terrorist just to blow stuff up, they're a lunatic and once again run away from them. But terrorism is a political act, and what is the weapon? Terror. It's not necessarily, it's not that they want to kill or hurt people, they want to terrify them. Yes, that process might lead to killing people. That's why it's so problematic, for obvious reasons. But why do people resort to terrorism? Because they have no power. They feel they have no power, no one's listening to them. No one's listening to me, but they'll listen to me if I blow up a building. Does that make sense? Do you see a problem with that? Do you think that's going to lead to change or make people mad? There's a problem there, isn't there? But it's nobody, so terrorism is, so everyone got this. Terrorism is a political act using terror by people who feel they have no power. Or the normal reins of power aren't working. So I have to blow things up. I mean, the most famous examples of terrorists in American history are people like George Washington, John Adams, Sam Adams, Thomas Jefferson. Who are they using terrorism against?
British.
The British. But to our point of view, they're freedom fighters. That's why terrorism is so complex. You know another terrorist? John Brown. Terrorism is complex. But the point is, it usually never works the way they think. Can states commit terrorism? That's what total war is. Total war is state-sponsored terrorism. We will get to that in World War I and World War II. Speaking of state-sponsored terrorism, that's why part of the reason the pinata atomic bomb is back there. Pinatas equal terror. No, it's the atomic bomb. So they thought they could blow it up. And so there are terrorist acts all over the world. And these were directed against like assassinations, like the Empress of the Austrian Empire was assassinated. And leaders of government officials, a lot of them in France, in Germany, in Spain, in Italy. Here is a bomb in the Estates General in France, terrorist bomb, their legislative body. Here is a bomb in an opera house where the wealthy elite would go in Madrid. Here is the assassination of the premier of Italy. Here is the Tsar of Russia. Tsar Alexander I was literally blown in half by a terrorist bomb. Blown in half. And he would live for half a day with his lower torso blown off. I don't even want to think about that, except for I had to tell you. Whose assassination is this? Anyone know? President William McKinley of the United States was assassinated by an anarchist. These are all over assassinations. Did they work the way the anarchists wanted? The exact opposite, didn't it? Think about how people want revenge. And by the way, terrorist attacks, do they make you feel like, hey, let's blow everything up and have a safer world? No. What do terrorist attacks make people feel? Scared. What happened to the United States after September 11th attack? That was a political act, a very complex political act, and the United States totally freaked out. For good reason. Terrorist attacks don't work the way they want. But who did these attacks discredit? Who?
The end.
Say it again.
The end.
Not just anarchists, even though, yeah. Who else? Anybody who believed in the ideas the socialists wanted. Anybody who wanted an 8-hour workday? If somebody was pushing for an 8-hour workday, would you say, no, I don't believe in an 8-hour workday because that might hurt our payroll and have an effort on wages and you would have a... No, what would you say? You want an 8-hour workday? You're a what? An anarchist. This discredited socialists all over the world. And they didn't know how to act to this. They just bickered amongst themselves. But anarchist is not scary enough. By 1900, the call was, there are a bunch of bomb-throwing anarchists. Anybody who wants better working conditions, you're a bomb-throwing anarchist. You believe there should be equal rights between men and women, bomb-throwing anarchists. And the thing about that was, because most people don't, follow it closely, they have lives to lead. All they know is anarchists are scary because they're killing people. It's a quite effective weapon. After the Bolshevik Revolution, what would they call labor unions? Bolsheviks are communist or Reds. And that's where you get the Red Scare in 1920. It's the same thing. 1900, bomb-throwing anarchists. So with that, the left would grow. They would have power. But the left has never been all that strong, the far left. In fact, using William Blake's great poem of Saturn eating his child, they would eat themselves. Yes, one of the great paintings of mythology. Don't you love that painting? He ate his son. It's a great bit of mythology. Okay, that's an awesome painting. You don't seem to like it as much as I do. Okay, first person was actually repulsed by it. The left eats himself. The left was always relatively weak in the United States. They got really strong in the Great Depression, the year before World War I, then the Red Scare. The left is really weak now in the United States. But let's get to them. These are philosophies, ideas. Let's get to reality. What it really meant. The Panic of 1873. And this economic disaster hit. Now, there's already been a couple panics. 37 and 57 we've talked about. There's actually one in 1819, arguably 1848, but 1873. And this showed you have a much different economy. And the biggest reasons for this was partially over speculation. There was a real estate boom, especially in what's going to become New York City, but also over speculation in this new thing called stocks and these new things called corporations. And when I say there's over speculation, remember that's when people buy low, trying to sell high. What's a bubble? When the prices of stocks do what? Keep on blowing up greater than their actual value. And what happens when people realize, oh, I'm spending greater than the actual value? Prices tumble. How did a significant number of people buy these stocks or this real estate? How? Loans. You said this would ripple to every part of the economy. Those tulips look beautiful, so I'm going to spend my entire life savings on a tulip. Yes, that happened in the Netherlands in this economy, the classic bubble. Bitcoin, same thing. So with that, but also, by the way, I'll get to that. Where's my mouse? This is from the New York Times, financial disaster. There's also overproduction, especially in railroads and steel. It's just also this boom in railroad building. Well, what happened is with railroads, if you produce more than what the market could bear, If there's more railroads than the market could bear, what do the different railroads have to do to get people to use their railroads? They have to cut their price. If you cut your price, what happens to your profits? Profits drop, and eventually railroads go out of business. Overproduction and over-speculation go together. Oh, we can build railroads. Everybody wants a railroad. Oh, we're all getting rich on this. Let's buy stock. And they go up together. Well, that was happening in 1872, 1873. And then one more thing. Congress, becoming much more economically laissez-faire by the end of the century, would be conservative. They would pass the Coinage Act of 1873. This established, write down, the gold standard. So this would formally tie U.S. money to gold. There were still greenbacks from World War or from the Civil War. There's no real set financial system at all. It hadn't been for the entire history of the country. Little glitches here for the National Bank or Treasury system. The United States copied Britain and the Netherlands and went on the gold standard. And almost immediately, all this paper money that people had that they thought was worth money, what was it worth? Nothing. So there's less money in circulation. And so at that moment, that would help trigger the crash. All of a sudden, people didn't have money. Prices tumble. What did all this create? Please write down the word deflation. The value of money went up, but prices dropped, profits dropped, wages dropped. And if you don't have any money, deflation is a killer. Or if you have debts, deflation is a killer. Who does deflation help? Creditors, yeah, very good debt. If you keep that debt, creditors are helped. And what's one more thing? If you have money. If you have money, just wealth, deflation helps you. Deflation in every economic boom. So this is actually a bank panic. This triggered a worldwide depression, partially because this new economy, capitalism, relied upon capital and jobs. And what did that lead to? 18,000 businesses closed. I should have done this in a different order. So let's get to wages and profits tanked. If businesses shut their doors, that means workers are unemployed. And even companies that survive, their sales are down. If there's a significant number of unemployed workers, wages drop. By definition. But this is also going to trigger a massive bank panic. So here are bank failures. Moderate level bank failures. And then look at 1873. And you'll notice how the depression, it started in 73, but by 77 and 78, look at all the bank failures. These are banks that shut their doors. And bank failures, bank panics, are endemic in over-speculation economy. Or also, businesses start their business, they borrow money to start it, and can't pay back their debt. But think about speculation. Let's say you went out and bought stock in a railroad or real estate. The price tumbled. Can you pay your debt back? Can't pay back your debt. So what happens to the bank that loans you money? They might be able to absorb 1 or 2 or a small percentage of their people, their debtors, not paying them back. But what happens if half the people they loan money to can't pay it back? What happens to that bank? They're gone. They shut their doors. And they wouldn't do it like, oh, we're having to come get your money out of your account. No, they would shut their doors at night like it's a normal day. They gather everything up and hit the road. And they wake up the next morning and the bank is shuttered and you have nothing. If you had a savings account in the bank thinking of doing the responsible thing and putting money in the savings account, what happened to that money you thought you had? Gone. You might have a piece of paper saying the bank owes you this money because I have a savings account. It's gone. The banks don't keep the money you put in the savings account. They loan it out immediately. In fact, they're hoping that, or they're counting on most people won't come at the same time trying to get their money out. So let's say you know a lot of people. Cool, huh? But they lost their money in the bank. They had in bank A, and that bank shut down. They lost their money. Fortunately, you have your money in Bank B. And you went to Bank B and you said, you're safe, right? You're not going to shut down. And what are they going to tell you? Oh, we're fine. Do you believe it? You just saw your friends lose everything. What are you going to believe? What are you going to do? And that's what a bank panic is. When banks start collapsing, everyone rushes to even healthy banks and take their money out. Does that make sense? And they all go at once. Even healthy banks get hammered by this. And that's bank panic. That is a bank panic. And that happens every single time. It happens today, but not the same way. During the New Deal, as part of the New Deal under Franklin Roosevelt, they have deposit insurance. And so at least most of your savings will be protected by insurance. And so bank closures can happen, but you won't have the same level of panic. Kind of a big deal. If that didn't exist, the worldwide economy would have, I don't think it was in 2008. So this is going to ripple to everything. So what we're going to have is, there's no demand. No one can borrow money. Banks that survive aren't going to loan money. People who lost their job aren't going to buy anything. If you still have your job, are you going to buy anything? You might lose your job tomorrow. So there's no demand, which is going to lead to more layoffs and more workers unemployed. It's a horrible cycle. Profits drop, wages drop, demand drops, meaning more unemployment, more profit dropping, and so on. More banks closing. Eventually, this is an estimate. It's really hard to figure out unemployment today, let alone then. But at least 20% in big cities are unemployed. And this is so devastating because there's still 40% of the population that makes their sole living on farms. So this is a significant number of workers. All of a sudden, they were working, most of them hardworking, working really difficult jobs, and then all of a sudden they have nothing and starving in the streets. This is at Tompkins Square in New York, 1874, where workers came out just simply demanding a job. We want to work. We're starving. And the city sent out the police and the militia to beat and they killed or wounded over 100 workers, just starving workers. That was in New York City, 1874. And so 20% unemployment. Do you see the problem here? This is and it got worse every year, got worse. And that is going to lead to the 1877 Great Railroad Strike. They started the B&O Railroad. The B&O Railroad had already cut their workers' pay by 25%. And they said, we're going to cut it again by another third. The B&O Railroad was actually still making money. Not like it was 1872, but they're still making money. By the way, I know I put down strike of militia. Why did the B&O Railroad cut their pay of workers even though they were still making money? Why would they do that? Huh? Say it again. They had to make more money. They could, because what did they tell the workers? You complain, there's 1,000 people ready to take your job. So take the pay cut. They can't do that if there's very few unemployed. If there's a lot unemployed, cut their pay. So the B&O Railroad actually runs along the coast, and then they have the main branch that kind of branches out like this. The St. Louis and Chicago. Chicago. A really profitable railroad. So they still were making money. Along that line, started in Wheeling, West Virginia, but went up to Pittsburgh, kind of just followed the tracks. The workers went on strike. Now don't think about it in terms of like an organized strike. They just said, we're not going to work anymore. How dare you do this? I mean, they're terrified. They're thinking, you cut us again tomorrow if we don't do something. And if one of us complains, they'll fire and replace him with somebody else. So we're just not going to work. And they basically just shut down the tracks in Pittsburgh. Well, the governor of Pennsylvania did what they'd always done for strikes. They sent out the militia to force the workers to take lower pay at bayonet point. Remember what I told you, government for the most time was very anti-union. Here's the problem. What kind of people made up the militia in Pittsburgh? They were workers going through the same things and same fears. You can imagine what they're thinking. If that happens to those guys, it can happen to me. And what did the militia do? They joined. Remember the same thing happened in Shades' Rebellion? They joined. And all of a sudden, once news of that hit in Pittsburgh, it spread up and down the rail lines. It became a nationwide, not organized, but strike. And workers felt the system was rigged against them. Those with wealth are getting more wealth because of deflation, and they're being crushed. Or they're getting their pays cut. They felt the system was rigged. All these areas in red are areas where there are major railroad strikes, but it happened in other businesses too. But don't think organized. It's just like this general, a combination of anger, but more just absolute terror. People were terrified. You know, can't feed your family. You kicked out of your home. Can't pay your debts. That's real terror. And you might get fired. So all here. And soon this would be known as, they didn't call it the Civil War, but that's what it was. They called it the Great Upheaval. And the Great Upheaval spread throughout the Northeast. I should mention that the Redeemer governments in the South, remember that term Redeemer? They're like, see? Our system's better. You guys got all the strikes. President Hayes, the one who became president with the Compromise of 1877, he was under a lot of pressure to do something from business leaders. And this is going to be a big shift. The Republican Party was, and it still would be for the next 50 years, but still had a little bit of, are we for labor or business? Hayes decided business completely. They sent out federal troops, fresh from Reconstruction duty. So there were troops in South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana, no longer there because of the Compromise of 1877. The tiny little U.S. Army, most of the troops spread out on the frontier, except for those troops on Reconstruction duty. And they very consciously used racism. Why? This part I did not type in. But color were a significant number of troops that were on Reconstruction duty in the South. They were black soldiers. And they used black soldiers to put down white workers. Knowing they would not unify because of racism. So this shows white cavalry, and certainly had white cavalry. They have very segregated units. They used black soldiers. Remember Bacon's Rebellion? The idea of make sure they couldn't unify together? Well, that's what they did. And this would be the tactic for the next 40 years. Montana is going to have 2 regiments, U.S. Army regiments. Now, partially they're there, the legacy of the Great Sioux War, but in Missoula, but also Miles City. And there, but Missoula, it was a regiment of black soldiers, a 6th regiment. Why? To put down strikes of miners. Because most of the miners were white. And so racism would be used here. It worked much better than they thought, which is also a kind of the tragedy of this. Anywhere from 200 to 500 people would be killed or wounded in putting down the strike. This was not organized, it was terror. And out of this, the realization hit that the militia system is a disaster. And they federalized the militia and created what we have now, the National Guard. And so according to the Constitution, the U.S. government, the federal government, equips and trains the National Guard and can nationalize them into the Army. But in peacetime, they can be used by the state, and the specific function was, what if there's another great upheaval? And so that's the National Guard today. Remember this whole thing about why you need a militia? We talked about that with the militia, slave rebellion, Second Amendment, comes to fruition right here. An organized militia, that's the National Guard, the regulated militia, according to the Constitution. And it also showed something else. boy, labor has power. They were completely disorganized, but they shut down the entire traffic of the United States. Workers said we had enough. And it showed the power of workers. It also showed capital something else, those with wealth. Their fear would be unification of all the workers. If the workers unify, wow, do they have power. So this is going to begin one of the most violent times in American history. Workers who want to unify for better conditions against those who don't want unions because they might realize, wow, we might have to pay higher wages or whatever that might follow. This is a big change. Jay Gould, the financier who tried to corner the gold market up, trigger the speculation or trigger the panic, would say during the great upheaval of 1877, we ought to hire half of the poor people to fill the other half. That will save our wealth. He was only partially joking. And so that gives the attitude of this sum. So this, we're coming to unionism. Before we get that, I must draw you a picture. It's picture time. The boom bust cycle. Now, you're wondering why we're talking about spending so much time here. The same thing's going to happen in 1893, 1907, 1921, 1929. Okay, then the New Deal will pass a number of regulations to make sure there couldn't be over-speculation. They would get rid of all those, and so 2001 and 2008. We might be in a bubble now. It doesn't seem like the bubble of 2005. We'll see. But what we're talking about here is called the business cycle, or the boom-bust cycle. This is endemic in this new economic system. It's endemic, partially because of a combination of capital being so expensive and all the risk, and therefore the risk, we talk about monopolies. But also, because it's so expensive, the financial side, the desire, hey, let's get rich by speculation and not working. So you're going to have times of booms, followed by horrific busts, and then booms. And they will, each one will radically change the country. So the business cycle or boom bust. And yes, they still basically happen now. So you can see it when it comes. Let me rephrase that. You have an idea when it comes. But I'll also tell you why I thought it can be very hard to see. So we're going to make kind of a circle. So it's going to be boom and bust and make a circle. And so let's have boom on top. Boom. And boom times, that means there's certain things happening in the economy. The economy is growing. Maybe not evenly, but overall, the economy is getting bigger. There's more money in circulation. And there are certain things that happen with this. So with this, what happens to profits if there's a boom? Profits going up, right? I mean, logic, right? What's happening to unemployment? Yeah, workers are being hired. Unemployment's going down. What's happening to wages? If unemployment goes down, what happens to wages? Wages go up. Because now companies are competing with each other for workers. Workers can say, I don't like this job, then so-and-so down the street will give me more money. A little bit of this is happening now. It's starting to go away, but it was definitely happening at least in the last half of 2021. So wages are going up. What's happening to demand for goods? Going up. People are buying stuff. Buy. What's happening to credit? What are banks doing at this time? Are they loaning money or not loaning money? They're loaning money like mad. So I was looking up some stuff on Psycho, the movie Psycho from 1960, and an ad for Capital One. They're a bank, and their big money's credit card. Boy, that's big money. And they're marketing a new credit card right now because the economy is just booming right now for college students. They literally call it the college the college rewards program. Now, college students notoriously, at least are people that are like not very good with, or have financial issues. So I don't know if you know this. Maybe you'll find out. College is expensive. Do you see why they're marketing to college students though? They're willing to loan money to college students who notoriously don't have a lot of money because we're all making money. Let's just start loaning to everybody. Can I tell you my credit card story from college? So I'm in college. This is a while ago, so our credit cards are actually locked. We throw at each other. But there was this young woman I knew, really nice person, but just wasn't dumb. We just didn't really know a lot of stuff. And they would come through and they would market credit cards in the college and the student union. Credit card companies would come in, and we'd sign up with fake names to get free stuff. I know, looking back at it, it's not a good thing to do, but that's what we did. But she signed up for a credit card and got one. And I remember, I told her, you don't want to do that. You don't know what you're doing. And she said, no, it's fine. She got her credit card and just started buying all these new clothes. I mean, everything. Do you want to know why? Because she said, they give you a $1,500 free, and then you have to pay it back. Now, this was a while ago, but you know what the $1,500 was? That was the limit she could spend for this. And she thought it was free money. It's both darkly funny and really, really sad. And she wasn't alone. So she had spent $1,500 in clothes and thought she didn't have to pay anything back. Don't worry, those credit card interest is pretty low. About 25% compounding continues. Moving back to this. What else is big? So we got trade, all this stuff is going, but here's the biggie. How's optimism? How do people feel? What is the attitude of people during a boom? We're all gonna get rich. It's wonderful. Tomorrow will be even better than today. Everything is going great. Every single boom, people think that. And they think, we're all going to get rich. Tomorrow will be better. And how long is this going to last? Forever. Now, I know what you say, wait a second. You just told us all these buts. No, not this time. It'll go on forever. I remember the boom in the 1990s, and people were saying, we have a new economy. We'll never again have another recession. In 2005, as housing prices were exploding, there's a massive bubble. People were saying, housing prices will never go down. Take a second mortgage. And what happened? Housing prices tanked. People believe that every single time. Why? Because we're all making money. So they're making risky investments. They're buying things that maybe will be over their limit, but they're thinking, I'll have money tomorrow. I can pay back that debt. Every single time that happens. And every single time it crashes. I know a lot of people who thought they were really smart when they invested in real estate in western North Dakota during the oil boom. Yeah, housing prices are going up. In Williston, it's gone up 400% for a house. I said, yeah, but it'll crash because that's what they all do. No, we're all going to get rich. I know people lost everything. So, this won't be different, right? The next boom. Forever. New history. So, is this inflationary or deflationary? There's inflation. Good times, there's inflation. Inflation is generally good because that means tomorrow we're going to make more money. So let's take risks today. And the problem is, if everyone is thinking tomorrow we'll make more money, this always leads to the first step when booms begin to collapse. What happens is it's going in a cycle. Overproduction. They start producing more. You see more stores pop up, more businesses. People start borrowing more money to expand. Every single time, there's overproduction. Every time. There's also over-speculation, but I'll come back to that. Every time. We're all making money. We're all getting rich. What happens if there's overproduction? Eventually, profits will do what? If there's overproduction, what happens to profits? Profits begin to drop. Because if you're producing more than what people buy, that means you have to cut your price to get people to buy your product. Every single time. Overproduction. They're producing too much, you got people, prices drop. Prices drop, therefore profits drop. I should put prices here. Prices drop too. They have to start charging lower prices. Prices and profits drop. And what happens every single time? If there's overproduction, prices drop, and people got to pay back their debts. They borrowed money to expand. They borrowed money to start that business. You really saw it all over Helena. There something like 15 coffee shops shut their doors in 2009. 15's a lot for Helena. Why is that? Everyone's going to drink coffee. It's great. And crash it. We saw elements of that visual restaurants all over the country during the pandemic. Same thing. What does everybody do if prices are dropping because of overproduction? What should you do if there's overproduction and prices are dropping? What's your logical instinct to do? You're going to cut back production, right? Can you cut back production?
No.
No. You got to pay back your debts. So what does everybody do if prices drop? We got to sell more. It's a terrible cycle. Every time there's overproduction, it triggers more overproduction because you're caught in a trap. I have to sell more to get out of debt. Now, if it's one person, it's really horrible for that. It's scary. But what if it happens to everybody at once? It's counterintuitive, but it's a disaster just waiting to happen. And you see this, you ever go see a store or a restaurant, I'll just say real fast, and you know they're in trouble because they offer like an all-you-can-eat special. You ever see those? Or 25% off. You know why they're doing that? Same thing. Oh God, I gotta sell stuff. I know it won't make money, but I gotta sell something. I always feel really bad because I know what's coming. And it always happens. Almost always. The door will be shut down. And on that happy note, we'll see you tomorrow. Don't forget the forms that Sawyer's get. Please get it done so you get it. Or I will get the dartboard out. Blindfolded darts. See you tomorrow. I need water. You too. Yeah. Oh! Did you get the... Did I look at your notes? Did you turn those notes in?
Well, I'm showing them to you.
You did? I got it. Okay. I'll make sure I get this one. I couldn't read my own writing. I was walking and writing, that makes it worse, yeah. See you tomorrow. Principal's good. Cadillac Desert. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So PBS, is that for environmental study?
Yeah.
I should tell him, PBS did a series called Cadillac Desert. Based on the book, it is really well done.
Are we in the group chat? No.
I should tell him.
Oh my God, guys, people, you're so pretty. Oh, honestly.